Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back, everybody.
So, guys, we're going to expand on what we were talking about yesterday with the video on Atlantis and possibly finding some of it in the Gulf of Mexico, because there's so many comments. People have brought up different thoughts on where it was. And what we've gotten from the guides always is that Atlantis wasn't just a single island. And so we've asked the guides, and please do excuse the monkey butts in the background.
Yes, thank you.
If they bark or whine, they're just having a good old time. Atlantis was a global civilization. And so it was basically, well, it was technically advanced. It was also that which brought about ultimately the end of a system. And there's a lot of clues, and we're going to put it all together with what we have gotten from the guides. So when we look at the globe, first and foremost, the globe during the time of Atlantis did not look like this at all. It wasn't just a single island that went down and disappeared.
No, not at all. I mean, it was just everything was incredibly different. And I don't know if you guys can imagine one of those sand windows where you tip the sand and it creates a new landscape of sorts. And this is kind of what we're dealing with here.
Absolutely. So we want to put some ideas together to give you a fuller explanation on what we've gotten from hundreds of channeling sessions with the guides. And a few people have mentioned, will you do books? We'll definitely get around to that as we get situated. We'll definitely start putting things together. When you see the movie 2012, maybe not quite that dramatic, but in some ways, in some areas, pretty much like this.
Well, I would say so, because when the earth tips, land listens and water listens. So it's going to do gravitationally what land and water does, which is, cover things up and in some cases reveal other things. And it can be, quite fantastic, I would imagine.
This makes me think of a book written by Barbara Hand Clow. And it was called Catastrophobia. She wrote this, I think, maybe in the late 90s or right around 2000. And the whole premise was our preoccupation with this type of end-of-the-world disaster is because we're traumatized, because we remember this happening through our DNA lineage. So this is sticking with us, these memories of absolute cataclysm, entire continents sinking, new continents being born, massive end-of-the-world type, apocalyptic, Armageddon type of scenarios that did occur at a point in the really not too distant past when you really put everything in perspective.
And that's something that we look at when we're looking at ancestral DNA. Those can carry on the damages of our ancestors and cataclysms included. So just as our DNA can pick up things that we did in a past life through curiosities, our DNA can also pick up things that have happened in the past that were very, very frightening. And probably still we have these memories, or at least we're able to tap into that DNA memory and feel it once again. So that's why there's this overhanging fear for a lot of us.
When we look at the civilization we have now, it's kind of brought about with the remnants of Atlantis and then the controllers guiding it. And in some ways, our civilization is, I'm just saying this first time to Cindy, is kind of like, the worst parts of Atlantis amplified.
Mm-hmm. I would say so too, because we're in such a dark age. And when we use the word dark, I mean, informationally, we are just in pitch black most of the time.
Absolutely. So again, when you look at the tilt of the Earth and you see that axial tilt, 23.43 degrees, it wasn't always like that. Not at all. And what we've gotten from the guides is that this tilt of the Earth happened not too long ago. It coincides with what's called the Younger Dryas extinction event. There's been multiple mass extinction events that have hit the planet. As we see here, over millennia, Earth has seen and lost countless living species. None is more well known than the disappearance of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, or so they say, 65 million years. For many epochs, mega reptiles dominated the planet until, they say again, their thought is an asteroid crashed into the Gulf of Mexico, sending these creatures into the history books. Such large spans of time make these events difficult to comprehend. Most people may not realize that a comparable event occurred in the prehistoric period before the human civilization arose. And this is the story of the Younger Dryas event and the megafauna extinction. 12,000 years ago, right about there, 11,700, 12,000 years ago, it was massive. There's remnants, there's things called the Carolina Bays, which look like asteroid hits that happened in that time period. We do know there's a mega crater up in Greenland too. But what was the whole of this event? There was more than one thing going on. But again, when we look to woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and all these events, all these creatures of the past, they were wiped out. Almost everything was wiped out. In fact, the Earth lost so much life in this time period, and it shifted, and the continents were different then. And again, everything is so much different than the history that they give us. And here we see from mysteriesunsolved.com, Enki and Enlil, the forbidden history of the origin of mankind. Somebody else had a question or a statement saying, are Enki, Enlil, and Anu still alive? And we've gotten that, yes, they are alive. They live extremely long lives. They're not in charge, though, but they are still alive. We've also gotten that Anu is not really the top of the food chain either. Perhaps he was thought of as being more of a local top of the food chain, more of a general, so to speak, not really the top of the pyramid. Good analogy there. Yep. Top of the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. But we've also gotten that these beings do not reincarnate like we do, because they've kind of sold their soul to AI, so to speak. They've sold their life force to it. And so the actual God spark that's in all of us is something that gets absorbed into this AI willingly, this AI Borg, hive mind. So they don't do the normal things that, the typical evolution of a soul that occurs, going from species to species, life to life. It's not the same on their side when they make the choice to enter the Borg. And ancient Sumerian texts refer to the Anunnaki as those that descended from the heaven, a powerful race of extraterrestrial beings who projected humanity hundreds of thousands of years ago. See, the thing is also all the timings are kind of off because we cycle through these yugas. They come into our sphere of influence. They're in our sphere of influence directly for so many thousand years, and then they're gone. They can still influence us remotely for many more thousands of years, and then we're out of their zone of influence. And then we enjoy a beautiful time of basically a golden age. And then we go into the silver, and then eventually we start coming down more to where they could start to influence us more and more. And it's not just them, because they're not the top of the food chain. We have the Draco, we have other dark entities, and this AI that's really at the top of the food chain. As we get back down, then they start to make their appearance again, and we go through another period of darkness where they are, in control of the power structure on the planet.
Right, and that's the control that we're kind of speaking about now, where we talk about these people, these nameless, faceless beings that are in charge, who are calling the shots and also overshadowing many of the leaders that we see as humans. They're very easily overshadowed by these entities, and that's why we get so much of the horrible stuff that happens. Like, Earth is not compatible with so much of the technology that we have here now, and it's not good for humans in any way, shape, or form. And how do we justify that when we think humans are in charge? And the answer is it's because humans are not in charge.
Absolutely. So you could think of the Yuga cycles again in different ways. And you can think of it as a sine wave, which is really so much like DNA, a DNA spiral, right? I mean, this is really how it is. It's an ebb and flow type of thing. And everybody has their thoughts, of course. As you see, this one's talking about the kingdom of heaven and Christ's return. But, Yeshua is able to be contacted even right now, and will respond to anybody, and it'll be easier to contact these benevolent beings as we get out of the Dark Age. So the Younger Dryas event is really the same event that we're talking about when we hear the legend. Again, these flood stories are thousands of years older than the biblical. So again, when we're just thinking about things in biblical terms, we're thinking of things in an extremely abbreviated term that doesn't give the whole picture. And it's fascinating to see. We talked about before, in a golden age, humans might live like 100,000 years, 10,000 years in the silver age, 1,000 years in a bronze. And in the Kali Yuga, if somebody hits 100, it's a miracle, right? So we read on, the Anunnaki, those who descended from heaven, were the primary gods of the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylonians who lived in Mesopotamia, which is now Iran and Iraq. And again, recognize that many beings can be called by different names around the globe and in other worlds as well, but still be the same beings, just different names. But not all of the deities that we see of all time are Anunnaki, not all. For instance, Aset, Isis, is a being that's more of a 5th, 6th, and 7th density, a very, very high density being, well out of the scope of the Anunnaki, so far above them that they're nowhere near that particular being. So they're not all the same. And when we see people lumping them all and saying these are all Anunnaki, that's again, a misrepresentation too, because there's many differences between them. And so Enki was one of the most significant gods in Sumerian mythology here on Earth, and the patron of the city of Eridu, where the ancient residents of Mesopotamia thought to be the first city established in the world. Enki's responsible for the creation of mankind, of Homo sapiens sapiens, with Ningashita and other help from others, of these bodies, but it's not the way they term it. So the eternal soul, the God spark that's in all of us, they didn't create that. That is so far above and beyond where they're at, and they can't even reach that anymore.
No, but they did design this suit, and they do have the pamphlet to our bodies, so they do understand our inclinations. They understand what we are prone to. They understand that human laziness thing, and that's where they like to take advantage so much and keep selling us things that are, for our convenience and to help our lives be better. But we really need to stop falling for that and understand that being part of the earth, being part of the ways of blending with the earth is the best way. It's the best way to be, especially in the times we have coming up before us.
And so, mankind's destiny, according to them, is just basically to serve the gods.
Yeah.
Just to serve the gods. And, that's, when you look to the Bible, what's the end outcome? Right? When you look to Revelation 22, well, God's on earth and mankind serves him. There you go. It's the return of the Anunnaki is what it is. And I know that is shocking to some people, blows other people's minds, pisses off others. But that's the reality of it. The day of the Lord, so to speak, is the return of the Anunnaki, definitively. And we have gotten this basically from them themselves. They have basically announced themselves to us. Cindy didn't go under trance channel, but she was able to communicate with them because they reached out to us. And to describe them as arrogant, it doesn't quite. That's just the beginning. Yeah, they view humanity as nothing but slaves, a tool, a fly. Yeah, they don't have any sort of respect for humanity on the whole. Of course, there's individuals in there that are a little bit more inclined to be nicer to humanity than the ones that really run the power structure there. So humans, now this is fascinating again, because it goes along exactly what we're talking about, the lifespans with humans when we're in other yugas. Humans who at this time had long lives, not like what we have now, multiplied rapidly, and Enlil, the chief of the gods, very disturbed by the noise humans were making, decided to send catastrophes to Earth to reduce the population. And in each catastrophe, the humans begged Enki to teach them what to do to survive. And it's the whole arc story. And again, it's thousands of years older than anything biblical. Yeah. Way older.
And I just want to mention, during my awakening, this was probably one of the biggest things that stood out, was these stories of the Bible were far, far older than what they portray. They were like,
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, their origins, where they come from, the Bible is a rehash. Mm-hmm. And it's the controller's rehash, and that's where we need to understand that. Otherwise, we're just simply thinking the way they've trained us to think. We're believing the mainstream media, so to speak, the mainstream religious media. So, the flood comes and it wipes out the masses of humanity. Think about this, though. Think about this other statement. Humans had long lives, multiplied rapidly, right? And in order to do what they wanted to do, they sent catastrophes to reduce the population. What are we seeing now?
Yeah, I know. Look at all the things that are going on now. Look at all the fear that's being created. And unfortunately, in many circumstances, there is a lot of death and carnage.
Absolutely. So again, population control and also keeping them divided. Look to the Tower of Babel. Humanity is united. We can't have that. Come, let us go down there. It's not God the Father, Holy Spirit, and Yeshua. That's such a distorted point of view. It's never made any sense. It doesn't make any sense. When you look at it from the original point of view of these Anunnaki beings, it makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So again, send plagues, bring the population down to a manageable number. There's something in Georgia that states 500 million is all that's needed to run the planet. The planet's still being mined for resources as well as loosh. They only need a certain number. This is what happens. How many times, and we've talked about the battles, the Battle of Kurukshetra, which some sources say 1.7 billion people died during this war. 1.7 billion at a time when the planet was supposed to have not even a fraction of that. Well, people had longer lives. They multiplied rapidly. Yeah. And again, population control. Bring them down. There's this is the controller system time and time again. So what does all this have to do with Atlantis? Well, this is the fall of Atlantis. As we've talked about before the flood, there was no moon. The moon was brought here by these beings, and we know it affects our emotions. It has a gravitational effect on our bodies. Our bodies are 65 to 80% water, depending on how old we are and what shape we're in. So the moon exerts an influence over our emotions and everything, and it also keeps the Earth at that tilted 23.5 degrees roughly, which gives us the seasons. Before then, it was like basically a spring-summer type of weather pattern all year round, without the massive storms, without the hurricanes, without the tornadoes. All those things are a byproduct of having the moon here, as well as the earthquakes.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like the entire Earth was a beautiful Garden of Eden for a while.
It was. The Garden of Eden existed when, the original creator did its plans. And yes, there is a creator of this universe too, but it's not the Anunnaki. That's for sure. They're the ones that screwed up everything. They're the ones that twisted and distorted everything. They're the ones that give us the mainstream media, the political systems, and the mainstream religious thought patterns as well. And so they brought the moon here to keep the Earth at that tilted 23.5 degrees where the weather will be more severe, where there'll be earthquakes, there'll be floods, there'll be droughts, and it'll also affect us emotionally, and it'll also affect our physical body. So this is, this is exactly what we're seeing. The story is all there in the Bible. There's two creation stories there, one by the true God, which again is more of a spirit, as the Spirit of God went over the waters of space. And I'm going to share with you guys a message we channeled from that Creator God that actually did create this universe and the way he worded it. Again, nothing but love. And that Creator God, who is not the ultimate source, does reference source as being love, and that is the ultimate truth is love. But yes, as we said before the flood, there was no moon in the sky, and we see this from tribes all over the globe. We see it from tribes down in Africa. We see it in Italy as well. The moon was brought here on purpose. And we look at the Kardashev scale, we get an idea of the type of technology that would be available to extraterrestrials that were hundreds of thousands or millions of years ahead of us.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, we put all this information together. It is a lot. It's a lot to break down, but we're in a time now where we have the ability to look further, dig deeper, find deeper understandings. And this is why they are calling it the Great Awakening. Right now is the time to read and absorb as much as possible to get a good understanding of what we are doing here.
So the source of the original Atlantis story that we got, that was related to Plato's by his ancestor Solon, by the priests of a temple at Nice. So this is, second, third hand type stuff. And this is going back to ancient Egypt. As you see, Solon lived between 638 and 558 BC, approximate date of his visit to Egypt, 600 BC. Solon asked the Egyptian priests when Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea and vanished, and the priest replied 9,000 years ago. So that brings us back to 11,600 years ago. We're right in that time period. But the Atlantean civilization was much bigger than what's thought. Some have pinpointed it as being right here on the corner of Western Africa, and have pointed out to the spiral patterns. But again, we see pyramids everywhere. Mm-hmm. They're all over the place. We see very similar building structures all over the globe. Slightly different, but very similar construction. Atlantis, again, was a global civilization. Some have pointed to Antarctica and said, well, maybe it's there. And some say, no, it just simply is Cyprus. It's here in the Mediterranean. But there were outposts everywhere, all over the globe. Lemuria Mu predated Atlantis as far as the civilizations. And Lemuria originated when we were in a fifth density state of being. The beings were more energy body beings, more light beings at that point in time. But we were on the descending path. So as time went on, we went down into fourth density, and at that point in time is when we have both Atlantis being born, so to speak, and we have Lemuria in the decline, but they were coexistent for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that time that they showed me the coexistence was a really beautiful time, because Lemuria, it was all about harmony. It was all about living, working, literally breathing with the earth, each other. One inhales and one exhales, and literally you are the earth. And then Atlantis coming in and being in somewhat partnership with this Lemuria for some time, but then eventually, as we're moving into the Kali Yuga, technologies, EMFs are born, and unfortunately it got out of hand at a certain point.
Yeah, there's of course the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which talk all about that, and then the Dark Ones, the ones that overshadow people, the reptilians, and all starting to take control over the leaders. And it was a mess. And they will, they seduce through technology.
Yes. Oh boy, do they ever. I mean, how nice is it that you get every commercial that you watch, if you still watch any mainstream media at all the conveniences that they're waving in your face, and this is not for it's not for your good, it's not in your best interest, but they're going to make you take these conveniences because every time you accept them, you're selling a little bit of yourself to them.
Absolutely, to the point when it's inside your body, which, again, nanu, guys, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's inside your body, and oh boy, how are you going to survive without it? Eventually that's what we're looking at.
But again, getting you to willingly accept it. Again, it is a choice in some ways, even though, we can't help to avoid breathing, and it's in the skies every day, wafting on down. So, to say that, Lemuria was definitively here and Atlantis was there, yes, there were large land masses that are now totally under the sea, and yet things are going to right themselves. So just to show you, this is what Cindy got from the guides. Everywhere you see a circle was basically a cultural center of Atlantis. So it was global. And especially in the areas of dark green heavy woods, which have now overgrown.
Right. They told me look to the water, look to the deep, deep water, and they said look to the lush green. These are all places where you're going to find remnants of Lemuria and Atlantis coexisting for a very long time. Unfortunately, when we have other entities move into place and get everything very, very chaotic, a lot of this stuff doesn't just sink for a little while. No, it's hundreds of years worth of soot, silt, and regrowth growing on top. It's very difficult to unearth.
Absolutely. And so, the map itself didn't look anything like this. When before the Earth had that 23.5 degree axial tilt, there were many different land masses that are no longer there, and other ones rose. And when this age is over, the moon will be moved away again, and the Earth will tilt again. And at that point in time, then we'll have everything change yet again, as has been forecast by everybody from Casey and Shipton, and it goes on and on and on. All the people that have seen the rebirth of the Earth, and Mother Shipton said that the new lands are where people are going to be going to. Casey talked about Northern Europe disappearing in a twinkling of an eye. Everything is going to be totally, totally different. But the Atlantean culture was all over the globe. Again, much higher tech than what we think. Interactions between different extraterrestrial species.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that for a moment, because I know we've talked about the different types of species coexisting, but I wanted to give the feel to you guys for when they're showing me these places, and when people are interacting, they're showing me that there's booths of items, of things, and energy exchange is very, very important, and they knew that, and they kept everything in balance. So nothing was sold, everything was exchanged. People are using their best talents, their best gifts, and they deliberately get along. And when it is seen that there is disharmony, one has an innate need to pull things back into balance. And this is how things were for so very long. And they're showing me all different kinds of entities, different species. Now, one thing they show me a lot is the color white with the gold outline. So for whatever reason, I think it has something to do with purity and harmony. They show me a lot of this color with the white and the gold outline, and it kind of makes me think about, what is it? Is it Greece, where they have the people in those white robes and stuff?
Yeah.
Two very, very important things needing to be together, and I think the gold has something to do with working with the earth in many, many ways.
And it's some cultures are really fascinating, like the Phoenicians, because they were a seafaring people, and again, outposts were all over. And so they traded in the Mediterranean, they traded in Africa, they traded in the Americas, they traded all over the place.
Yeah. And who brings in the money system? That's where we got the hang up.
Yes, exactly. And so this system was in decline because we were already heading towards the Kali Yuga. And then we got to the point where the Earth and Nibiru were at the same density, and they were able to come here physically en masse, and then they did. And this is when the quote-unquote gods lived here on Earth in their temples with their human slaves serving them. And that's where we have all those, depictions of humans tied at the neck, hands tied behind them, or bowing down and serving the gods. When you look to Deuteronomy 32:8, and it's the Song of Moses, and it speaks of the Lord taking Israel to be his own, and it talks about the sons of the gods dividing the earth, into different tribes, each one taking a tribe for their own people. And then, these tribes were at constant war with each other, serving their patron god. Each one of the Sumerian city-states had its own patron deity. And it's still basically at that level, where we are today. So, some of these wars going on, sure, in some ways it's still a war of dominance. Of course, there is a overall plan that's going on.
Right. I mean, they have a plan harnessed and something initiated. And they just like people to just go along with the plan because it makes it easier for them. It's the ones that step outside the box. Those are the ones that they're going to target and try to take down. So every time you hear something that is different, feel something that is different from what you're exposed to, these are things that I think we're all going to need to get a feel for, is accepting what is different, accepting maybe even that which is not understood. Maybe more of us need to go in that different direction instead of going along with the mainstream, because that's how we stay kind of harnessed in the system.
Absolutely. And then you get people talking about these planets, these rogue planets that are going to cause chaos and destruction. Planet X, the destroyer, and all this. And talking about Nibiru itself. There are many planets, many, many more planets in our solar system than we realize. Many of them are just outside of our visible spectrum in 4D. Many of those will be visible within the next 20 to 30 years. So then all of a sudden, everything in the heavens is going to look very different. And there will be interaction between different species again, as there was in the past. In Atlantis, they knew there were beings from other planets that were coming and going all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was no surprise. And they were also in a place where there was more light, more of the photon belt. So we got to think about the little sliver of light we can see right now. And there's such a huge, huge, huge light spectrum. And we are just in this one little tiny sliver. But that's going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger as we move forward in our evolution.
And there still are beings of different densities on the planet as well. There are beings that are fourth density beings that are on the planet, fifth density beings up around Shasta, survivors of Lemuria, that never lost their ability to stay in fifth densities. They kept themselves in a higher density. And a lot of these different beings in the not too distant future will be openly amongst us yet again. There are entire cities underneath the ocean that are, basically already could be visible to us if we were to be allowed to know that they were there.
Right. And all of this starts to happen because we have a new awareness of existence, and that will be brought to our attention here. I don't think it's going to be too much longer. They're going to try to normalize a lot of these entities, these extraterrestrials, and the ones they bring in, I strongly feel that they're going to say, these are the good entities, so anything the mainstream portrays as a good entity, that's something that I would question.
Yeah, the first ones that you're going to see are going to be the controllers themselves and all the ones working with the controllers. And that should be obvious as the first part of fourth density that we're going into is lower astral, and this is where they reside. It's not going to be for a while until we see the more benevolent ones openly amongst us. But then, of course, we also have that whole element of the solar flash, the solar sneeze, where many will be transformed in one shot. And the Earth itself, it feels like there could be two different realities going on. Not necessarily that the Earth, I mean, we have gotten that the Earth doesn't want to leave anybody behind.
No.
She views every single entity as one of her children.
Right. I mean, we are her, she is us. And really, when it comes to separation, that's just something that she doesn't want to be separated from any of her children. It makes her feel whole. You know, as we walk on the earth, like there's this magnetism. And if we have our feet on the earth, just our feet, not the soles of our shoes, but as we use that magnetism, we strengthen her, she strengthens us, and it makes us more one. And just think about it. They've even given us these souls that separate us from our mother often. So even if you have house plants, anytime
Soles
you
of shoes.
yeah,
just to
soles of
say-
shoes, sorry.
Just to be really specific.
Yeah, soles of shoes that separate us. And well, curiously, that's the word soul. I don't know. Maybe there's something there.
It's interesting too, because I mean, most souls are made of rubber, right?
Yes.
So, again, it's another way to block us off. You know, they block off the sun with whatever you want to call them up there, those trails up in the sky. They've been doing that for decades now in order to slow the ascension process. They have gotten us into a culture where we use building materials, you know, and all that are not as harmonious as can be. We see often in these ancient sites, people lived surrounded by stone. And there's a reason, because, you know, conductivity and the ability of the life force to travel through, not block us off from all the natural vibrations. And then we're surrounded by the EMFs, our smartphones, our routers, now the towers everywhere. Can you escape the FIVEG? You know, it's getting harder and harder to escape all this. All this is meant to be an energetic trap.
And when we were talking about the information yesterday, and the guy who discovered this place off of New Orleans coast, he said that somebody must have floated all of this granite, you know, down the river. But no, they immediately showed me that this was done in the air. They moved all that granite in the air.
Sound waves.
Yes, sound waves.
Yeah, it was done by sound waves. When we look at the concentric circles, which, you know, is something that was used in describing Atlantis, we see a lot of similar crop circles.
Yes.
And then, of course, it does remind one of an atom in a way, with you know, the nucleus, and then with electrons circling, which also is representative of the solar system itself, as above, so below. You know, again, it was a mix of different beings. There always have been beings that have been what we would call aboriginal, still basically functioning in a very, very non-technical way, non-technological way. And then there were a lot of beings coming that had technology that would blow our minds away. So it was a combination of all these things, and it was a global civilization, as Lemuria, again, was basically fifth density into fourth density, and then Lemuria basically was no more, and then Atlantis was fourth density down to the third density, and then was no more.
Yeah, and then there was these supposed accidents where everything kind of gets wiped out.
Yes, and so now we are at another critical juncture and swinging in the opposite direction. And so I hope this helps you guys. Please do share your thoughts, comments, questions, and you know, maybe we could address those in upcoming videos as well. Fascinating subjects, to say the least.
Very fun stuff. You know, we're remembering a lot when it comes to our DNA. Sorry, they don't want me to talk about this. Go ahead. Ouch.
Well, all's going to be revealed, absolutely, and it is all imprinted in our DNA. So as we're able to have more of our DNA, again, 90% junk DNA, you could thank the Anunnaki for that, because they turned it off. This is, you know, their version of the story is mankind was created by them. The reality is that mankind was downgraded by them.
Yes, very much so, and filtered too. So information that we get is very limited because of the way we are created and made.
And in reality, to even limit yourself and say you are a representative of mankind, you're actually more than that. And that's something that most people maybe don't even think about, because we are multidimensional beings, and we might have a life as a human and have a life as something totally, totally different in a completely different world, in a completely different solar system, different galaxy, and maybe even beyond that.
Right. We are a representation of Source, every single one of us.
Absolutely. So thank you guys, as always, for your support on Patreon and Ko-Fi. Use the coupon code EEA and get a discount at Medicinal Foods. Definitely products there that can help you detox and boost the immune system. And check out evolutionaryenergyarts.com to learn more about us. As always, God bless and namaste.
Namaste.